Awaken your shadow. The truth sets some people free. It offends everyone else. By Seth, the Red Neo, Czerepak.
Chapter 2. The Golden Thread. All the experiences of life are designed by Providence to force men and women into self-activity, to compel them to cease being creatures of circumstances and master their environment. In his lowest stage, man is the child of chance and circumstance and the slave of fear. His acts are all reactions resulting from the impingement upon him of forces in his environment. He acts only as he is acted upon, he originates nothing. But the lowest savage has within him a principle of power, sufficient to master all that he fears, and if he learns this and becomes self-active, he becomes as one of the gods. Wallace Wattles, The Science of Being Great. Be yourself, no base imitator of another, but your best self. There is something which you can do better than another. Listen to the inward voice, and bravely obey that. Do the things at which you are great, not what you were never made for. Ralph Waldo Emerson, Self-Reliance. Try not to become a man of success, but rather try to become a man of value. Albert Einstein.
New header, life's most important question. What are you worth to you? This is the most important question you'll ever answer. Before I tell you why, let me tell you what I thought I was worth when I was 17. It was 2 a.m. My friends had left, and they already felt light years away. There I sat alone, the walls of my room closing in around me. I was afraid to turn off the light, out of dread that the darkness would swallow my heart whole. My reality had collapsed from a three-dimensional world of color and life to a faded black and white sketch. I felt like a tattered cork bobbing in the midst of the stormy sea of my worry-ridden teenage mind. Everything felt far away. Only the numbness of complete isolation felt real. I didn't even feel real to myself. My mind raced with hopeless and scattered thoughts, each one orbiting my awareness like shattered fragments revolving around a slowly dissolving axis. All I wanted was to escape the damp, dim, and noisy prison of my own mind. That's when I walked into my father's room as if led by an invisible hand. We had a .22 rifle, one shot, a split second of pain, and that was the only thing standing between me and peace from the quiet war waging inside my mind. I took the rifle to my room, I sat on the couch that served as my bed, I stuck the barrel in my mouth and leaned on the trigger. Sheer panic swept over me as I realized what I'd just done, but nothing happened. The safety was on and I was still alive. Shock seized me as I set the rifle aside. That was really stupid, I said out loud. A deep feeling of relief swept over me. Shame came next, then something else. I was suddenly seized by a deep fear of who I was alone in the room with. Suddenly, the mind I thought I knew lay before me like a mysterious abyss, limitless darkness that stared deeper into me than I possibly could into it. It's a terrifying feeling when you realize you are no longer safe in your own presence. A simple choice suddenly stood before me that night. I either needed to do that again and get it right this time, or I needed to find out why I'd done it. Maybe it was only my curiosity that made me choose the second. But my journey of self-discovery quickly led me to a startling and liberating truth that eludes most people for life. New subheader: You may not be the real you. Discovering and activating your shadow self starts with understanding that there is more than one of you. Psychologists call this the theory of subselves. Carl Jung spoke about the archetypes of the self and how these different selves show up to fulfill specialized roles and responsibilities. The Hermetic philosophy speaks of the feminine, masculine, material, and higher selves in the same way. The Hindu scriptures speak of the self that experiences the material world as different from the self that experiences our internal world and the spiritual world. The Holy Bible makes a distinction between the flesh and blood self and the spiritual self. We find the same distinctions between selves in the Buddhist Dhammapada and the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Even our everyday language reflects our awareness of ourselves. We say things like, I can't help myself. I was the one who held myself back. I've got to get myself together. I need to remind myself why I started this. I'm proud of the way I handled myself. I was my own worst enemy. I need to forgive myself for what I did. I need to give myself a break. I've been pushing myself too hard. I just need to trust myself. We say these things with no question of who is talking to or about who. Who can't help who? Who held who back? Who needs to get who together? Who needs to remind who? Who is proud of who? Who is whose worst enemy? Who needs to forgive who? Who needs to give who a break? Who is pushing who too hard? Who needs to trust who? And most importantly, who tried to kill who that night in my bedroom? Most of us are completely blind to what these internal negotiations really mean. Yet, they are the single most impactful negotiations of our life. They shape how we treat ourselves and how we allow others to treat us. They also shape which parts of ourselves are worthy of being brought onto the stage of our experience and which should be denied, repressed, or even despised. This is why the question, what are you worth to you, is the most important question of your life. It cuts to the core of your decisions about what you deserve and what you are capable of. It determines what you will accept and what you will reject. Most importantly, it determines which of yourselves are valuable and acceptable, and which need to be sent into exile. It is the question at the root of the repression that creates our shadow self. And these decisions about what you're worth, what you deserve, and which parts of you should be repressed aren't a product of your intellectual intelligence, IQ, or even your emotional intelligence, EQ. Intellectually intelligent people make dumb decisions all the time because they're unaware of this dynamic. People with expert-level knowledge on human emotions do the same thing for the same reason. You've probably met dozens of people whose knowledge, experience, and expertise in psychology, counseling, coaching, or a similar discipline did little or nothing to improve the quality of their personal decisions. You've probably also noticed that they have elaborate explanations about why they did what they did or how they'll do better next time. You find the same disconnect when you ask someone what they want or what matters most to them, and their consistent actions tell a different story than their words. Nearly everyone's values or opinions change when it comes time to decide where and how they'll invest their time, energy, effort, money, or reputation. We do this because there's a deeper intelligence at work within us, one that very, very few people even know about, and there are only a handful of living experts in. Once you discover this hidden intelligence, which I'll reveal in a moment, everything in your life will take on a new context. But it starts with accepting that there's a deeper part of us controlling our most important decisions. Think about your own life experience, and you'll see what I mean. How many times has someone told you they cared about something only to contradict themselves with their actions? Hell, we all do this to some degree. We do it when we eat junk food instead of following a healthy nutrition plan. We do it when we blow money instead of saving it. We do it when we snap at our spouse or kids instead of communicating with them. We do it when we hit the snooze button instead of hitting the gym. Human beings are walking contradictions. Entire libraries could be built from all the books we've written about our struggle to match our spoken values with our actions. On top of this, most of us are masters of convincing ourselves that we're the rare exception to this rule. This contradiction in words and actions makes our opinions and projections about our motives and our future behaviors very, very unreliable. If you base your knowledge of yourself and others on these verbal projections, you'll never discover your authentic voice and vision, and you'll always be confused by human behavior. You'll also never achieve lasting inner peace, and you'll always have an up and down relationship with success. This might sound like a cynical view, but if you want to discover, activate, and actualize your higher self, you can't afford to be naive or ignorant about human nature. One of the most insightful books I've ever read about human behavior is called Hidden Persuaders by Vance Packard. The book is full of examples of marketers trying to discover what consumers would actually spend money on. Study after study revealed that there's a sizable gap between what people say they want and what they choose to spend money on. As Jesus said, "Where your money is, there your heart is also." But the contradictions don't end with our decisions about money. The same is true with our decisions about who to date, who to align ourselves with, how to invest our time, energy, talent, and belief. The same is true when it comes to our decisions about what to accept and what to reject, and most importantly, which of ourselves are valuable and acceptable, and which need to be sent into exile. We don't use the skills, talents, or opportunities we actually have. We use those which we value as being consistent with who we are, what we're capable of, and what we do or don't deserve. This is one of the first things I learned when I set out to understand why I had tried to kill myself that night. As I'm writing this book, after thousands of hours of one-on-one coaching experience and my own decades of learning and growing, I'm even more convinced of the undeniable power of this deeper, hidden intelligence. New header, your mind's invisible master. We don't know ourselves nearly as well as we think. The belief that we do is at the root of all our impulsive and self-sabotaging behaviors. Not some of them, all of them. Think about the last time you did or didn't do something and later regretted it. Maybe you snapped at someone you love, broke your diet, or procrastinated on something important. In the moment, you probably had what felt like perfectly good reasons. Only later did you wonder, what was I thinking? This happens because our decisions and actions are driven not by conscious processes, but by unconscious or superconscious ones. Rob was a brand new chiropractor when we met for our first coaching call. His practice had no patients. He'd finished his degree 6 months prior. He was 1 month away from emptying the savings account he was supposed to live on while building his practice. He'd made literally one marketing call and had spent the rest of his time setting up his office and searching the internet for new marketing ideas, but implementing none of them. By the time I'd spoken to him, he had decided that his best move was to spend another $2,000 on more education. Why? Because he believed that his lack of formal training was responsible for his failing practice. That was the story his left brain was telling him. But it wasn't true. When I asked why he wasn't making phone calls, he told me that he was afraid of rejection. He'd hired another business coach who was helping him to develop his sales confidence and persuasive communication skills. On our first coaching call, I found out that Rob had a strained relationship with his father, who had been a very successful chiropractor, but an epic failure as a father and a husband to all 4 of his wives. I immediately told Rob to fire the other coach and to forget about enrolling in the $2,000 program. I told him to put the final $5,000 for our program on his credit card, and I went immediately to work with him in helping him to detach his identity as a chiropractor from the identity he associated with his father. 6 months later, Rob had a thriving practice and had moved into a new office because he had outgrown his old one. He'd been featured in a local magazine for his rapid rise to success as a local entrepreneur. If you're trying to grow a business right now, you might be distracted with questions about what type of marketing I had him do or how I had him overcome his fear of rejection or sharpen his sales skills. We did none of those things. I simply told Rob to stop listening to the bullshit his left brain was feeding him about becoming more qualified or less fearful of rejection or more persuasive on sales calls. Rob's real problem was that he had devalued his disciplined self and his charismatic self because he saw them as being a reflection of a father who he didn't want to be like. All it took was 1 week of guided shadow work sessions, and Rob put together his own plan for reaching out to prospective customers and filling his practice. I later found out that he had also saved his marriage. His newly pregnant wife was ready to leave him and go live with her parents because she'd lost faith in his willingness and ability to provide for his family. Bottom line, Rob didn't need more formal training. He didn't need the perfect marketing plan. He didn't need to overcome his fear of rejection or to sharpen his sales skills. Sure, these would have helped, but not while he was trying to drive his life with 1 foot on the gas and another on the brakes. The real problem was that Rob literally didn't know himself well enough to understand why he was sabotaging his life. He had to drop the facade of false self-awareness and stop listening to all the people who reinforced that left-brained fantasy. The truth was that Rob's problem could not be solved by sharpening his intellectual knowledge of his craft, nor by overcoming the emotion of fear, which is part of our natural biological wiring. His problem was rooted in how his deeper intelligence was operating on a subconscious level. It's the same thing with every biological human being alive. Our lack of awareness about this hidden intelligence and how it operates in our being is at the root of literally all of our self-sabotaging behaviors. All of them. Wise people have known this for eons. There's a Hindu proverb that says, "The three great mysteries, air to a bird, water to a fish, man to himself." A bird doesn't think about the air. It doesn't need to. Air is simply there, constant, invisible, and reliable. But if the air were to suddenly vanish, or if air pressure changed in a way the bird couldn't instinctively respond to, it wouldn't understand what had gone wrong. It would only experience chaos and disorientation. A fish has the same relationship with water. It doesn't swim around analyzing the water's quality. It simply moves, breathes, and exists. But if the water were to vanish or turn toxic, the fish wouldn't stop to diagnose the issue. It would just experience panic, confusion, and an inability to act effectively. We are no different when it comes to our own consciousness. The thoughts, emotions, and inner narratives that fill our minds, worry, doubt, fear, endless rationalizations, are like the bird's air and the fish's water. We exist so completely inside this mental noise that we mistake it for true self-awareness. But here's the catch. This noise isn't just misleading, it's often inaccurate. Michael Gazzaniga's groundbreaking split-brain experiments, which we discussed in Chapter 1, demonstrated this with eerie clarity. The left brain isn't lying intentionally. It's just creating a plausible story to make sense of the world. The problem is that the rational brain isn't nearly as accurate as it is confident. And this is why self-sabotaging behaviors so often surprise us. We believe the stories we tell ourselves. I procrastinated because I'm lazy. Or, I snapped at my partner because I was tired. These explanations might sound reasonable, but they rarely touch the deeper unconscious drivers behind our actions. We live on the tip of an iceberg, narrating our lives as though we're steering the ship, when, in reality, much of the direction comes from the unseen mass below the surface. The mind we think we know lays before us like a mysterious abyss, limitless darkness that stares deeper into us than we could possibly stare into it. It's a terrifying realization. It means you're not who you think you are, and you're not in control the way you think you are. The good news is that once you're aware of this deeper intelligence, you can drop the intellectual and emotional facade of false self-awareness and discover the driving force behind all of your beliefs and actions. This is what Carl Jung meant when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." My answer to Jung's statement is this. Once you make the unconscious conscious, you can direct your life as if fate is on your side. That's the goal and the benefit of shadow work. But it starts with accepting that the person who talks to you inside your head, the person you typically call me or I, is not the person in control of your life. It's not even the real you. Your higher self is the real you. Accepting this is the first step to inner peace and personal power. Most people are too busy following the diversions of their intellectual mind and their emotions to discover their higher selves. They keep believing the stories their rational mind tells them about who they are and why they do what they do. They dive deeper into self-help books, therapy, meditation, searching everywhere except where the answers actually live. Ironically, the more they study, the more sophisticated their self-deception becomes. Their increased knowledge simply gives their rational mind a more elaborate vocabulary for spinning false narratives about their motivations and choices. This is why intellectually brilliant people make self-sabotaging decisions and justify them with reasons that sound true, but on closer examination are mere cover-ups for the consequences of their poor decisions. This is why deeply empathetic people repeatedly get hurt or betrayed, often by individuals with almost no emotional intelligence. They can often consciously profess their personal values, but they're unaware of the intelligence that runs even deeper than their emotions. This is also why willpower and motivation always fail in the long run, no matter how strong your conscious intention might be. Motivation comes and goes, and willpower is merely your conscious mind trying to subdue your subconscious like a lion tamer with a leather whip. The lion can be trained to obey certain commands, but if it gets hungry enough and has no other food source, it can easily devour the person who thought they were in control. And this is the foolish futility of trying to solve our most complex challenges using intellectual or emotional intelligence, or even by making ourselves accountable to external influences, like a coach, a calendar, or a time management app. In the realm of decision, the realm of true personal power, the realm of our higher self, a deeper intelligence rules supreme. That deeper intelligence is value intelligence, and it's the golden thread for growing your shadow self into your higher self. New subheader, climbing the golden thread. Value is the driving force of our lives. We invest our time, money, energy, and hope into things based on how much we value them. The challenge is that value intelligence, also called our VQ, operates beneath our conscious awareness, secretly driving every decision we make. It's the golden thread your consciousness descends to retrieve your exiled shadow self and bring into the light of your awareness. It's the active ingredient in the shadow work strategy in this book, and the key to everything you want in life. Value intelligence is a scientific category of human intelligence, discovered through the groundbreaking work of Robert S. Hartman in the field of formal axiology. The science of formal axiology has its own scientific journal and body of compelling evidence proving its practical and scientific efficacy. Hartman revealed something profound. Every choice we make, whether logical, emotional, or instinctive, is fundamentally shaped by our value judgments. These aren't surface-level opinions like, I like this or I dislike that. They are rapid, automatic evaluations happening beneath your conscious awareness, guiding your every decision. Formal axiology tells us that it's not logic or emotion that truly steers our lives. It's the hierarchy of values we hold, whether we're aware of them or not. The popular narrative in personal growth circles suggests that humans make decisions emotionally, not logically, and this idea is often reinforced by studies showing emotional centers in the brain lighting up before logical processing begins. But this oversimplification misses a deeper, more nuanced truth. Research conducted at Stanford's Decision Neuroscience Lab uncovered something far more interesting. Participants in the study made complex decisions while their brains were scanned in real time. The results showed that emotions and logic do play significant roles, but they operate within a hierarchy, one where values sit firmly at the top. Emotions act like passionate courtroom witnesses, pulling our attention with intensity and urgency. Logic behaves like the cool-headed analyst, carefully examining the evidence. But neither emotion nor logic has the final say. That role belongs to values, which function as the unseen judge, delivering decisions based on deeply embedded principles that transcend both emotional impulses and logical reasoning. It's not that emotions and logic are unimportant, it's that they are subservient to values. Your values are the invisible filters that determine which emotions rise to the surface and which logical arguments hold weight. This same pattern emerged in the findings of the Wisconsin card sorting test. In this experiment, participants were asked to sort cards by a set of rules that would change unpredictably throughout the task. Success depended on the ability to detect patterns, adapt quickly, and integrate emotional feedback with logical analysis. When researchers examined patients with brain damage affecting their emotional centers, they noticed something strange. These participants could still process information logically, yet they consistently made poor choices because they couldn't feel the subtle emotional signals telling them, something isn't right here, adjust course. Even more striking was what happened to participants with damage to the brain regions responsible for emotional processing. Even when their emotional and logical faculties were fully intact, they failed spectacularly. They couldn't make sustainable decisions because their values, the deeper currents guiding their choices, were no longer functioning. Without values to anchor their behavior, their decisions became erratic and chaotic. If emotions are the gas pedal and logic is the steering wheel, values are the GPS. Without the GPS, it doesn't matter how well you steer or how fast you accelerate, you'll still end up lost. This same dynamic appeared in the Iowa gambling task, another iconic experiment in decision-making research. Participants were asked to select cards from 4 different decks, each with varying levels of risk and reward. Some decks offered high rewards but carried hidden long-term penalties, while others provided smaller, more consistent gains over time. Most participants, after some trial and error, gravitated toward the good decks, guided by a mix of emotional feedback and logical reasoning. But patients with impaired value processing centers consistently failed to recognize the best long-term strategy, even when their emotions and logic were firing correctly. This wasn't a failure of reasoning or emotional awareness, it was a failure of value processing. Imagine your mind as a smartphone. Emotions are like the touchscreen interface, the immediate way you interact with the world. Logic is the processing chip, analyzing inputs and providing outputs. But values are the operating system, the invisible layer that determines how the entire device functions. If the operating system is corrupted, no amount of swiping or processing power will produce the result you want. Even early developmental psychology reveals the primacy of values in human decision-making. Studies show that children form value judgments before they develop emotional regulation or logical reasoning abilities. In one experiment, infants were shown simple puppet shows where one puppet acted kindly and another acted cruelly. Overwhelmingly, the infants demonstrated a preference for the kind puppet, reaching for it over the other. This happened long before these infants could articulate emotions or reason through their choices. Values, it seems, emerge first, like the foundation of a house. Emotions are the walls, and logic is the roof. But values are what everything else is built upon. When you consider these findings collectively, a pattern emerges. Emotions and logic are not the architects of your decisions. They are tools that are wielded by something deeper, your value intelligence. It's not your emotional awareness or your intellectual brilliance that shapes your most consequential choices, it's your VQ. And while IQ and EQ might influence the direction of your life, your VQ determines where you'll ultimately end up. If the cognitive and neurological structures of your VQ remain buried, unexamined, and out of alignment with what you consciously desire, you'll continue to act in ways that surprise, frustrate, and even sabotage you. Just imagine how rapidly, powerfully, and authentically your life will change once you bring this incredible intelligence under the control of your higher self through shadow work. Jesus spoke of faith that could move mountains. He told his disciples that they were capable of doing all the things he did, and greater. He told us that the kingdom of heaven was within us, just waiting to be brought into the light. This is the act of bringing our deepest intelligence into the light of consciousness. This is shadow work. New subheader, the 3 dimensions of value. The science of formal axiology sorts our value judgments into 3 distinct categories, or dimensions. The systemic dimension determines how you evaluate ideas and concepts. This includes your beliefs about love, success, justice, evil, and every other abstract concept that shapes your worldview. When your systemic values are distorted, you construct elaborate rationalizations for self-sabotaging behaviors. I remained in the toxic relationship that I spoke of in the beginning of this book because I was possessed by distorted ideas of love and loyalty. The extrinsic dimension governs how you evaluate practical actions and resources. This includes your judgments about time, money, energy, and every other tangible asset in your life. When your extrinsic values are confused, you consistently misalign your actions with your stated goals. You may waste time, money, or opportunity without understanding the cost until it's too late. The intrinsic dimension shapes how you evaluate yourself and others. This determines your self-worth, your boundaries, and the depth of your connections. When your intrinsic values are wounded, you either accept less than you deserve or demand more than others can give. These evaluations happen too fast for our conscious mind to follow, and on a much deeper level. By the time our conscious mind crafts a story about why we did something, the real decision is long past and the forces that drove it are undetectable. This is why the most destructive patterns in your life feel automatic and beyond your control. It's because they are. But here's where everything changes. These 3 dimensions of value intelligence are the golden thread that connect our conscious mind to our shadow selves and our higher self. Just as a master weaver uses a golden thread to create intricate patterns in a tapestry, your VQ crafts your decisions with a complexity and speed incomprehensible to our conscious mind, which can barely retain a 7-digit number for more than a few seconds. This makes the cause and effect link between our subconscious or superconscious value judgments and the consequences of our lives appear to be unrelated when they are anything but. This may very well be the most important point in this book so far, so I'll say it again. The consequences of your life are a result, direct or indirect, of your subconscious and superconscious value judgments. My client and friend, whom we'll call Paul, seemed to have the worst luck of anyone I'd ever known. Literally every time a big opportunity came into his life, it was countered by some catastrophic event that swept the opportunity right out from under him. These events almost always seemed out of Paul's control, but he had an uncanny pattern for attracting them. Finally, we had the coaching session that changed everything, for him and for me. Paul had been laid off from his job, was living off unemployment and an occasional freelance gig. A week before his unemployment was about to expire, his wife threatened to leave him and take their 3 children if he didn't get his act together. He came on our call in tears, and I honestly thought I had no answers for him. We'd tried everything in my coaching repertoire, but his uncanny strokes of bad luck were undoing all his progress. Then I had an idea. I advised Paul during his prayer and meditation time to take full responsibility for everything that was happening to him, including the things he seemed to have no control over. I advised him to give thanks for them and to treat their resistance as an opportunity to grow and advance. Most importantly, I advised Paul to listen for what his intuition was telling him about the connection between these external consequences and his internal value structures. This made no sense, but what happened next was absolutely miraculous. The same unexplainable strokes of bad luck turned into unexplainable strokes of good luck. It was impossible to make the cause and effect connection between Paul's actions and these new blessings, but I had him give thanks for them and accept them as the consequences of his actions. A year later, he was making over $200,000 a year, and his marriage was on the mend. What happened? Paul had put himself on the positive side of Carl Jung's profound statement. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Paul's decision to accept responsibility for his luck flipped a switch in his mind and body. He went from being beaten and battered by things that were out of his control to being blessed and boosted by things that also seemed out of his control. I admit that I'm not 100% clear on how this happens, although I do have theories. But the real lesson from Paul's story is this. What we call luck or miracle is simply the known effect of an unknown cause. VQ is the framework within which our higher self drives our decisions and somehow the universe itself. Our unconscious isn't just a warehouse of repressed memories and impulses. It's a complex system of value structures directing our decisions, our actions, and our destinies. Some of these structures we were born with. Others were formed in the crucible of our early life experiences, molded by the beliefs and expectations of our family, culture, and society. When these value structures become distorted, they create a strange kind of spiritual vortex around us that attracts both blessings and curses into our life. The book of Deuteronomy 30:19 says, I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. Shadow work is about choosing life and blessing over death and curses. It starts with accepting that you are not your name, your thoughts, or any of the roles you play or the stories you tell yourself about these things. Your higher self is your one true self, and it's on the same spectrum as your shadow self. New header, calling your exiled selves home. If you're feeling uneasy about what you've just learned about yourself, that's good. That discomfort is the first crack in the shell of false self-awareness that's been keeping your highest potential in exile. The golden thread is now in your head. You can't unknow what you've learned about the invisible master driving your decisions. Some of you are already sensing the profound implications of this truth. You're starting to see how this deeper intelligence has been shaping your life all along, crafting stories through your rational mind to explain decisions that were made in the depths of your unconscious. But here's where terror transforms into liberation. The same intelligence that's been running your life from the shadows is also your pathway to freedom. Your shadow self isn't a demon to be exorcised or even a wound to be healed. It's raw power waiting to be transmuted into mature strength. By now you know that you can't change your life by willpower, by changing your self-talk, or by any of the rubber chicken techniques you hear at motivational seminars and read in self-help books. As I said before, trying to change your life with these techniques is like holding your breath underwater. Shadow work transmutes your shadow self into your higher self through the 3 dimensions of value intelligence. Understanding these dimensions reveals how your most powerful qualities got repressed, exiled into shadow, and more importantly, how to call them home. New subheader: Systemic Repression. Remember being a kid and thinking that if you were just good enough, everything would work out perfectly? Or maybe it didn't matter how hard you tried or how well you did, nothing was ever enough. In either case, this is how systemic repression happens. Life teaches us that we must match our actions, personality, appearance, or performance to some impossible or unsustainable standard. When we're succeeding, we're euphoric. When we fail, it's a painful blow to our sense of normalcy and self-worth. These emotional highs and lows push us far outside our natural equilibrium, forcing our body to regulate. Our nervous system is designed to maintain balance by keeping us within stable emotional bounds. This is called homeostasis. Shadow work trains you to do this intentionally. If you don't do this, your body will take on the task whether you want it to or not. This is the root cause of systemic repression and a long list of self-sabotaging beliefs and behaviors. Think of a child who's labeled too sensitive when she cries, but praised intensely when she holds it together. Her emotional self learns that feeling deeply is dangerous and unwanted, while perfect composure brings safety and love. To protect herself from these destabilizing swings between rejection and approval, she gradually exiles the parts of herself that feel too much. Her compassionate self, naturally attuned to both her own emotions and others, gets pushed into shadow not because it's flawed, but because it threatens the rigid systemic standard of staying strong that seems to keep her safe. Repression literally becomes a method for self-regulation. The brain and nervous system record these methods until they become deeply ingrained habits or behavior patterns. This is how systemic repression creates your shadow selves. Think of someone whose definition of success and self-worth are bundled up into crisp all-or-nothing categories, with no room for adaptation or gray area between their good and bad, or enough and not enough inversions. This creates the same energetic roller coaster that forces the body to regulate behaviors and external circumstances within a comfortable or familiar range. This happens the same way the thermostat in your house regulates the temperature within a set range. This is how people create ceilings on their own success. My client, Robert, had just made $100,000 in a month for the first time in his life. No one in his family had ever made that much money in a full year. His parents had also instilled in him the impression that rich people had either cheated someone or overworked themselves to the point of neglecting their family relationships. While Robert was excited about his income breakthrough, his deeper systemic distortions about wealthy people literally caused him to blow all the money on things that added no lasting value to his business or his life. But that's not all. He became distracted by shiny object syndrome, procrastinating about important business tasks, and taking no action to reinvest his extra income into growing his business or even securing financial independence. Within 30 days, he'd burned up all the money, except what he needed to pay his expenses and get by the next month. Why? Because at an unconscious level, barely getting by was normal and good. Being rich wasn't. Robert didn't make this connection. Instead, his rational mind blamed this on a lack of focus, and a list of other rubber chicken causes you might read about in business or personal growth books. The real problem was that Robert's systemic distortions about money and rich people had put a lid on his earning potential. When his income skyrocketed, his subconscious money thermostat clicked on and brought his income back down to normal. I have seen this happen with people at every income level, from poor to middle class to rich and even super rich. We typically call this fear of success, but that's a misnomer. The real problem isn't based in fear. It's the result of deeper systemic distortions, and it can put a lid on more than just our income. Systemic distortions about love, attraction, or romance will cause people to attract and bond with toxic partners while ignoring, rejecting, or friend zoning good partners. But it doesn't stop there. Systemic distortions also cause us to deem one or more of our seven selves, including their needs, natural talents, or personality traits, invalid if they fail to match some rigid ideal. This is how attractive people develop deep insecurities about their appearance. It's how intelligent people develop insecurities about their intelligence or ability to communicate their ideas. It's also how self-made millionaires retain their insecurities around money and financial independence even after they've made it financially. I could break out dozens of examples, but the central point is that the noise of your left brain is just the story you tell yourself about these insecurities. The deeper cause is a systemic distortion followed by the repression of one of our shadow selves, followed by the symptoms we've discussed in previous chapters. This is compounded when our systemic evaluations are misaligned with the laws of human nature or the material universe, and bundled in with our sense of self-worth. This attachment to our systemic distortions blocks the crucial feedback loop that would allow our systemic understanding to adapt and mature. This can happen with any of the seven selves we discussed earlier. Your secure self gets locked away not because it seeks safety, but because your systemic understanding of security contradicts how safety manifests in the natural world. When these distortions get tangled up in your identity, I need perfect control becomes I am out of control, and this situation isn't safe enough transforms into I am not safe. Your adventurous self goes into hiding not from lack of courage, but because your concept of adventure clashes with the natural rhythm of excitement and rest. This is how this isn't exciting enough becomes I am not exciting enough, and this isn't worth the risk turns into I am not worth the risk. Your sovereign self withdraws not because it lacks boundaries or even confidence, but because your understanding of independence contradicts the inherently interconnected nature of human life. When denied external interaction, this relationship isn't independent enough morphs into I am not independent enough. Your compassionate self vanishes not from lack of feeling, but because your concept of love conflicts with how human connection actually works. Without reality testing, this love isn't pure enough becomes I am not loving enough. Your charismatic self goes quiet not from lack of power, but because your understanding of influence fights against natural human dynamics. When denied social feedback, this impact isn't significant enough transforms into I am not significant enough. Your intuitive self dims its light not from lack of wisdom, but because your concept of knowledge contradicts how human understanding naturally develops. Without experiential learning, this insight isn't clear enough becomes I am not wise enough. Your transcendent self fades not from lack of purpose, but because your understanding of meaning clashes with life's natural cycles of clarity and mystery. When denied real-world engagement, this purpose isn't certain enough becomes I am not worthy enough. Notice how all of these systemic distortions lead to a devaluation, followed by the repression of their corresponding shadow selves. Before we continue, let me stress that the systemic dimension isn't bad. That belief in itself is a systemic fallacy. Clearly defined concepts of love, safety, success, happiness, loyalty, and other ideas help us navigate life and get more of what we want. Self-sabotage happens when these ideas are overly rigid and or misaligned with the natural laws of the universe and of human nature. This creates a self-guarded prison of systemic idealism where our seven selves can't engage with the world enough to mature and to evolve into fully divine glory. Case in point, the story I opened this book with. I thought I was in love with the woman who broke my heart and my life. The truth was, I was possessed by a systemic definition of love that completely contradicted how human relationships actually work. I defined love as absolute and unconditional acceptance. When reality screamed its feedback to me through her broken trust and violated boundaries, I held tighter, not because of my bond with her, but my own rigid adherence to a concept that denied the natural laws of human connection. This is why shadow work starts with examining your systemic evaluations of the needs, traits, and powers of each of your seven selves. Only then can you realign these standards with the laws of the universe and of human nature and grow them into the superpowers of your higher self. I know this is a contradiction to the "you are the master of your own reality" idea that you find in most personal and spiritual growth books. This is, in itself, one of the most destructive systemic distortions. Your true personal power emerges from your ability to align yourself with the divine mind of which your higher self is a unique expression. New subheader, extrinsic repression. Have you ever poured your heart and soul into a project only to have it fall flat when you tested or introduced it in the real world? Or maybe you tried to help someone with the purest intentions, but ended up making things worse? Or perhaps you've experienced the opposite, holding back your true capabilities because previous attempts to use them led to painful consequences. This is how extrinsic repression happens. Life teaches us that our talents and capabilities are either unacceptable, shameful, bad, ineffective, or even dangerous when expressed in the real world. Each painful failure, each backfiring attempt to help, each misunderstood expression of our authentic nature creates a deepening disconnect between our divine powers and their practical expression. It's not that these powers are flawed. They've simply lost access to the feedback loop that would help them mature through real-world experience. The extrinsic dimension is where your value intelligence learns from results and consequences. While systemic repression comes from rigid mental concepts, extrinsic repression comes from blocked or distorted relationships with the physical world and other people. When this feedback loop gets severed, our divine powers have no way to develop through experience, no way to calibrate through interaction, no way to refine themselves through practical application. Martha was an ambitious young saleswoman who had built her own multi-million-dollar mortgage firm by age 34. As a girl, she'd been put to work at age 13 by her father, who was also her boss. He only gave her attention when she did something wrong and needed correction. When Martha did well, he simply accepted it as the norm. No praise, no validation, no sense of connection or love. This created a devastating pattern. Martha learned to see herself and others as economic commodities who either produced value or deserved neglect or even punishment. Her natural capacity for leadership emerged in its untransmuted state. She became a tyrant who drove away employees and eventually suffered panic attacks. Her success came at the cost of disconnection from her own humanity. This pattern repeats with each of our 7 selves when they lose access to healthy extrinsic feedback. Your secure self oscillates between suffocating control and complete chaos because it can't learn from real-world consequences how to create sustainable order. Like a thermostat that's either blasting heat or freezing cold, it loses the natural rhythm of healthy regulation. Your adventurous self swings between reckless behavior and paralysis because it can't calibrate appropriate risk through experience. Without this feedback loop, it never learns the difference between foolish chances and calculated risks. Your sovereign self ping-pongs between domination and submission because it can't develop boundaries through actual relationship testing. Like a muscle that never gets proper resistance training, it either overexerts or atrophies. Your compassionate self bounces between emotional flooding and shutdown because it can't refine its sensitivity through real engagement. It's like having ears that either hear everything at maximum volume or nothing at all. Your charismatic self alternates between manipulation and invisibility because it can't mature its influence through genuine interaction. Like a speaker system that's either blaring or muted, it never finds its natural resonance. Your intuitive self flip-flops between perpetual learning without application and willful ignorance because it can't develop wisdom through lived experience. It becomes like a computer that's either processing frantically or in sleep mode. Your transcendent self seesaws between grandiose fantasies and purposeless drifting because it can't ground its vision in practical reality. Like a tree without roots, it either overreaches or fails to grow at all. The ancient alchemists understood this process. Their quest to turn lead into gold wasn't just metaphorical. It was about understanding how raw force transmutes into refined power through proper interaction with the material world. Each of your divine powers needs this same alchemical process, this dance with physical reality, to mature into its highest expression. This is why shadow work must move beyond examining our systemic evaluations to establishing healthy feedback loops in the physical world. Your divine powers can't mature in isolation any more than a muscle can develop without resistance, or a plant can grow without soil. Each power needs proper engagement with reality to transform from raw force into refined strength. This is why shadow work can't be fully achieved through meditation, prayer, journaling, and other purely self-directed means. When Martha finally understood this, her whole approach to business transformed. Instead of trying to prove her worth through pure achievement, she learned to let her actions inform and refine her leadership abilities. Her success became sustainable because it was built on real-world feedback rather than rigid performance standards. Like Martha, many of us try to force our divine powers to express themselves without proper attunement to physical reality. It's another form of the "you are the master of your reality" delusion that pervades personal growth literature. True mastery comes not from dominating reality, but from learning to dance with it. Your divine powers reach their full potential only when they learn to express themselves in harmony with the natural laws of cause and effect and of human nature. This is the true meaning of "your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." Bring your highest powers into mature expression and development through proper engagement with material reality and the conscious beings with which you share it. New subheader: Intrinsic Repression. The intrinsic dimension of value intelligence unveils a profound truth about your 7 selves. Each self is a star, together forming the constellation of your higher self, each shining its own light, but their real significance lies in the story they tell together. When you focus only on one star, you lose sight of the infinite cosmos they belong to. Likewise, when you lose the value of one or more of yourselves or of their unity, you begin to measure your own worth by external standards, your status, your life roles, the opinions or approval of others, your material belongings, or even your achievements. This is how intrinsic repression begins, not with external standards or real-world feedback, but with the deep forgetting or denial of our inherent value. Ross, my client mentioned in the introduction of this book, embodied this pattern perfectly. He measured his self-worth by a systemic standard that demanded an external appearance of having everything under control. This gave Ross tremendous command over the extrinsic realm, how to invest his time, money, and energy. But beneath the apparent big payoffs in the physical realm, there was a growing deficit in Ross's internal world. Every achievement became another attempt to prove his worth, yet the more he accomplished, the emptier he felt inside. His systemic ideals and extrinsic success couldn't fill the void left by his disconnection from his intrinsic value. This pattern manifests uniquely through each of our 7 selves. Your secure self becomes valued only for its ability to maintain perfect order and control, forgetting that it's sacred simply because it's consciousness expressing as structure and form. Your adventurous self gets reduced to its achievement of goals and victories, losing touch with its divine nature as pure creative force in action. Your sovereign self becomes measured only by how well it maintains boundaries and commands respect, forgetting it as sacred consciousness experiencing itself as sovereign will. Your compassionate self gets valued only for its service and healing of others, disconnecting from its divine essence as love experiencing itself through relationship. Your charismatic self becomes worth only what influence it can generate, forgetting that it is sacred consciousness expressing itself as pure presence. Your intuitive self gets measured only by the knowledge it can acquire and dispense, losing touch with its divine nature as awareness experiencing itself as pure knowing. Your transcendent self becomes valued only for its spiritual accomplishments and insights, forgetting that it is sacred consciousness knowing itself as pure being. The ancient traditions understood this profound truth. The Kabbalists saw the Sephirot not just as divine attributes, but as pure consciousness taking different forms. The Hindu mystics recognized chakras as consciousness expressing at different frequencies. Jung discovered these same patterns in the collective unconscious, appearing as sacred archetypes across cultures and time. When speaking of our higher self and its connection to the Divine One, the Mandukya Upanishad says, "The only proof of his existence is union with him." When it comes to your 7 selves, intrinsic valuation isn't about how you measure your value. It's about who is answering this question: what are you worth to you? This question has haunted every step of your journey so far. Your rational mind can't answer it without resorting to standards that capture a mere fraction of your divine nature. But your higher self doesn't measure your worth in teaspoons the way your rational or emotional mind do. It doesn't add up dollars and cents, compliments and criticisms, successes or failures to decide who you are, what you're capable of, or what your dreams are worth. In fact, it doesn't measure at all. It just knows. It knows its own infinite nature, of which it, the real you, is a unique expression. It knows itself as an expression of the same intelligence that birthed galaxies and orchestrates the dance of subatomic particles. Right now, trillions of cells in your body are performing trillions upon trillions of computations, literally regenerating the physical body you live in. That same intelligence binds planets and solar systems together and expresses itself through every atom of creation. If you were to ask your higher self to measure out your intrinsic value in a pie chart, that chart would go on forever. If you were to ask it to graph your value on a line chart, the line would go up and up and up and up. You could follow it and never reach the end. Why? Because measurement only applies to finite things. Your higher self is the unique expression of the same universal infinite living mind that produced and sustains the cosmos, and what is infinite cannot be measured by finite standards. That thinking mind where all your self-talk is going on, the part you think is in control, can barely retain a 7-digit phone number for more than a few seconds. Yet it presumes to measure your worth, to decide what you're capable of, to determine which of your sacred selves are acceptable and which must remain in shadow. This is the way of the lost souls still ensnared in the narratives and the machinery of the Matrix. The path to spiritual liberation starts with understanding and accepting that the you who talks to you is not the real you. You are something far, far greater, and it's time to awaken your real self.
End of Chapter 2 of Awaken Your Shadow by Seth Czerepak.